Alright, today I'm going to be reviewing Ubuntu 22.04 LTS. So now, I know I haven't done videos covering Ubuntu 21.04 or 21.10, but those weren't long-term support releases, and I didn't really feel that they were significant enough to be worth reviewing. But Ubuntu 22.04 LTS is the next LTS release of Ubuntu, and it officially released last month on April 21st of 2022. And I know this video is a bit late to the party, but I kind of wanted to have some time to play around with Ubuntu 22.04 before, and also because I was still in the middle of one of my guides to switching to Linux series, specifically for elementary OS, and to keep consistency I didn't want to have a break between videos in the series just for the sake of doing this video. But without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so the very first thing you're going to notice is Ubuntu's new logo and boot up screen, as well as its freshly designed login screen. First impressions with this, I personally really like this change. It kind of keeps the new release of Ubuntu fresh and represents its continued growth and development over time. But anyway, let's log in real quick and I'll show you what the desktop is like. And I'm sorry that I don't quite have the best display scaling here. But anyway, this is what the new desktop wallpaper looks like. And you will notice some new icons, including especially the files icon. I personally think it looks really, really cool. So props to the Ubuntu team for that. But anyway, I'm gonna power off this virtual machine and show you what my Ubuntu 22.04 desktop looks like. There you go. I've got my Plank dock here and some of my Mac themes. Now, the biggest change with Ubuntu 22.04 is that it now ships GNOME 42 by default, making this the first LTS release to ship a version of GNOME from at least what I like to call the GNOME 40 series. Not 4.2, GNOME 42. That's their new numbering system. But anyway, here's what it looks like. I've got my screen recorder up here, and we can switch between virtual desktops through here, and we've got show applications here, which this is actually on the Ubuntu dock by default. I actually chose to hide it because I already have my Plank dock, and also you won't have these icons by default because I have a custom icon set, but you get the idea. This is kind of what Ubuntu 22.04's application menu looks like, or I should probably say what GNOME 42's application menu looks like. And of course, they've also upgraded a lot of their apps to the GNOME 42 versions. Now, it doesn't show here because of my custom theme, but the GNOME 42 apps will actually have rounded corners. That's a pretty nice design change. Now, unfortunately, some applications were held back at GNOME 41, probably because the GNOME 42 versions just weren't ready in time, but they have fixed a lot of the version fragmentation issues. It's kind of still there, but it's not as big of an issue as it used to be back in the 20.04 days. But anyway, I find a lot of the changes present themselves in the settings app. So first of all, you got appearance here, which you can still switch between light or dark mode, which is nice, but you can also pick your accent color here. Kind of gives you a little bit of customization. Now, I actually use Gnome Tweaks to customize, so that's why it doesn't have anything selected here. If I did try to select something here, it would completely change my theme, which I don't really want to do. But you can pick the size of your desktop icons here. Not that I have any icons on my desktop. And you can change the position of new icons. As you may have seen, Ubuntu 22.04 defaults to putting them on the bottom right, which is a change I don't really care for, just a personal preference, but you could always change it back to top left. But anyway, let's get to backgrounds here. And one feature that this has is that you can have separate backgrounds for light or dark mode. So that way, once you switch between light or dark mode, the wallpaper you've chosen for that is set automatically. And I also do want to mention that the keyboard menu got a major redesign. Instead of just having keyboard shortcuts, the first thing that comes up, you got some settings here. And if you want to customize your keyboard shortcuts, you just click View and Customize Shortcuts here, and they show up here. And now they're categorized under different categories, so you don't have all of them showing up at once. This was the case in versions of Ubuntu prior to this, but now you have it where not everything's showing all the time, which I do personally like that kind of organization. But anyway, it looks like there's not really a lot of changes since 20.04, aside from the visual changes, which are the biggest thing with 22.04. In general, with LTS releases, they don't like to change too much in order to ensure stability, because stability is what LTS releases are all about, especially considering that they're committing to supporting this for 5 years, and even up to 10 for Ubuntu Advantage subscribers. Now, a lot of you may have heard about GNOME 40 planning to get rid of theming and just have Adwaita as a theme with a little bit of customizability. I do want to give some good news. The Gnome Tweaks app still works on GNOME 42, and under legacy applications where you would choose your GDK theme, that still works for the vast majority of applications. There's actually very limited exceptions, like a prime example would be the Extensions app, which is fixed in Adwaita. So in order to make that look in place with my system, I picked the dark mode from Ubuntu's appearance settings and then applied my custom theme. And yes, you have to do that in that order, since if you do it the other way, selecting a theme from Ubuntu's appearance settings will switch it back to the default. And in my next video, I'm going to go over how I customize my Ubuntu desktop on version 22.04. Spoiler alert, I actually do way less customizations than I used to, at least compared to when I made my original How to Make Ubuntu Look Like macOS video a couple years ago, which didn't age as well as I'd hoped, unfortunately. But anyway, as we all know, with the good also comes a bit of the bad, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but as you may have guessed, no, Ubuntu has not switched back to the Debian packaged GNOME software in this release, and they aren't showing any sign of doing so in any future releases. I'd honestly be shocked if they do. Now, I do have the Debian version of GNOME software on this right now. If you're unaware of how to do that, it's pretty simple. Just search for software in the Snap Store. You might have to put in GNOME software, and then you just click install and let it install, and then once it's installed, you just close out of the Snap Store, open up GNOME software, and then uninstall the Snap Store. But anyway, I do want to say that if you have Flatpak installed on your Ubuntu 20.04 installation, when you upgrade to Ubuntu 22.04, you'll need to enable Flatpak support manually. Now, I can't speak for anyone coming from 21.10 since I've never used that release, but that might be something that you have to do. And also, an even uglier change that I really don't appreciate is Canonical's decision to switch Firefox, the default web browser for Ubuntu, to a snap package. And the worst part about this is they've dropped the Debian package and essentially replaced the Debian version of it with a transitional package that will just install the snap version of Firefox. They did a similar move with 20.04 with Chromium, but them doing it with the default web browser and the web browser that I use on a daily basis, that actually made me consider switching to Debian and no longer recommending Ubuntu to new users, because snaps are pretty slow to launch. They have improved on that over the years, but it still needs work. And at least more specific to my case, is that it doesn't apply my custom themes. But I have applied Firefox's dark theme here to kind of make it look in place with the rest of my system, and I find the launch speed is not too bad, especially when you get used to it. So I'm personally not too upset about it, but I do see how a lot of users will be though. And by the way, if you're a new user, no, don't try switching to Debian. It's not meant for beginners. After you've played around with Ubuntu for a little bit and you've got some experience with Linux, then you might consider trying out Debian. But for now, in your Linux journey, if you're a new user, just do yourself a favor and stay on the Ubuntu branch. Now, to sum it all up, there weren't really many significant changes aside from the visual changes and the upgrade to GNOME 42, but I personally really love these changes, even if it means that I have to switch to the Snap version of Firefox. But overall, I think for users on 20.04 LTS and even 21.10, I think 22.04 LTS is definitely worth upgrading to, especially considering that since this is an LTS release, it'll remain relevant for a long time. Like, I'm talking for 5 years, so up until late April of 2027. And even then, it's still going to continue to get ESM support for Ubuntu Advantage customers all the way up to 10 years, so 2032, so into 2032. Now, I do want to mention that if you are wanting to upgrade to Ubuntu 22.04 and you're on 20.04, the upgrade flow from 20.04 to 22.04 isn't officially enabled yet. And what that really means is if you're on 20.04 and you're wanting to go to 22.04, all you have to do is just open up a terminal and type update-manager space-d, and I'll have that command in the description. Now, I think for going from 21.10 to 22.04, the upgrade flow for that is already enabled. But anyway, thanks for watching.